Hello, friends. This is Trip, and today we're giving you a little preview, a little taster of what's going down this year at Theology Beer Camp. That's right, October in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'd love for you to come, Theology Beer Camp 2025.com. Well, this year on the Theology Nerd stage, we are sending out pre-recorded lectures from scholars around the different topics, be it AI and theology, doctrine of creation, or uh, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And this is a lecture from the one and only Jeffrey C. Pugh, who did the Rise of Bonhoeffer audio documentary, has written on Bonhoeffer, longtime Bonhoeffer scholar. At the session, he's going to be joined by Lori Brandt Hale and Reggie Williams, both Bonhoeffer scholars, and we're going to end up getting to wrestle in the session with the questions and topics that people coming to camp send in. We're hoping that allows those who like time to process and think about it, that had time to watch these and send in their questions and topics, and not just the super nerds who listen, follow, and come ready to rock. So anyway, this is just one of the lectures for that one session that we're sharing with you, and I hope you dig it. And because Jeff here wrestles with some rather specific concepts and quotes from Bonhoeffer and then what they mean today in our contemporary situation in politics and faith in the public square. And Jeff, provocative as always. If you can't come hang out with us in person, this year there's also an online Theology Beer Camp experience. And that's going to include getting a whole host of these lectures. Not only will you be able to join live for everything that's happening on the main stage with like keynotes from Kelly Brown, Douglas, Bill Clayton, John Dominic Cross, and Stacy and Juan Floyd Thomas and stuff like that, or the live podcast sessions with like Bible for Normal People. You have permission, the new evangelicals and such. But you'll get these series of lectures as well as the recordings of everything that goes on live in the rooms that we're not streaming directly in. So I hope you go check that out. Theology Beer Camp 2025. You can get ticket for either one. Come hang out with us. But without further ado, here's your little teaser. Some words from my buddy, Jeff Pugh.
Hello, campers for Theology Bible Camp. Okay, Theology Beer Camp. Listen, I'm here to give you some words about Bonhoeffer that might be used for discussion around the keg or wherever we are. And so I just wanted to make a few brief words about why Bonhoeffer is needed now more than ever. We're living in a time when we are living in the most dangerous times in many of our lives. It's no wonder that some people look back in history to find exemplars of both those who recognized evil and stood against it in their time, even when the culture around them was collapsing, falling prey to the forces of dominance and control. During the 1930s, it was rare to find people who saw the danger of the National Socialist Party, saw them for what they truly were, and it was even rare to find people who resisted its siren call to national greatness. I remember when I was in college, I first came across Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and of course, for a college student, he becomes kind of a hero because he was one of the few to understand the danger that was present and to respond to it. And so later on, as my life took its course in graduate school, Bonhoeffer and Barth became figures that, while flawed in so many ways, also you could look to them and say, in that moment, they understood the danger that they were in. So Bonhoeffer was not the only one, but his memory lingers because it has been kept alive by friends and students over the years. As some things to consider when we're at boot camp, I want to call our attention to a piece found in Letters and Papers from Prison in the Fortress edition of Dietrich Bonhoeffer called 10 Years After. It's a piece Bonhoeffer wrote to his conspirators and resistors to Nazi rule in 1943, mostly to his family, also his brother-in-law Hans von Dohnanyi, Hans Ulster, a general in the Abwehr, and his friend Eberhard Bethge. And if you haven't gotten a copy of Victoria Barnett's After 10 Years, Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Our Times, a very small booklet, I encourage you to grab a copy. It's easily readable, perfect for carrying around, reading when you're on the subway, and her introduction and analysis are worth the price of the booklet. I think we can find in this one short piece, After 10 Years, this one short piece, ample grounds for reflecting about a society that is presently under attack, where Black and brown bodies are endangered when they walk a city street or just driving their car to get groceries, where the threat of arrest and deportation grows every day, putting us on a trajectory where soon enough critics of this government could be placed in the same position and risk at the same treatment. And if you don't think it's possible, I think you're not paying attention. The forces that we struggle with now have always been with us, but in the present circumstances, we seem to be losing ground every day to tech edgelords, looking at you, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and others, and global oligarchs. This world that we live in presently seems so different than the challenges that Bonhoeffer faced. But as all authoritarian governments, there are family resemblances. The appeal to hate, bigotry, greed, racism, political systems that seek absolute dominance and control. There is a shadow of fear that hangs over American society now like a shroud, obscuring a lighter life, and it won't be there forever. But if it is to go away sooner than later, it will be because people understood what Bonhoeffer understood, and he offers us some powerful reminders to not lose who we are as followers of Christ in these times. We all certainly resonate with Bonhoeffer's words when he writes to his fellows, here, have there ever been people in history who in their time, like us, had so little ground under their feet? And with each passing day, it feels more and more uncertain as to what the future of this country, this society, maybe even the globe looks like. We're in one of those enormous change moments. Bonhoeffer challenges us with a needed vision of where we should be standing now in this moment of uncertainty when he writes in the section entitled The View from Below, it remains an experience of incomparable value that we have for once learned to see the great events of world history from below, from the perspective of the outcast, the suspects, the maltreated, the powerless, the oppressed and reviled. In short, from the perspective of the suffering. If we are not willing to place ourselves in the space of the suffering, then where do we place ourselves now? Bonhoeffer reminds us that unless you are willing to enter into that space, because you cannot see God, because God is found in the sister and the brother who is standing right in front of you. And unless we are willing to place ourselves in a place of vulnerable listening and learning from the suffering, we cannot do justice to the life that God has granted us. So, what does it mean to his position of seeing life through the perspective of the suffering? Well, for one, it means cultivating a space of empathy for those who struggle on the underside of history. I hear that empathy is seen as a weakness these days in certain circles, especially by Christians who worship at the altar of Caesar's power. But Bonhoeffer offers us a word directly to challenge this destructive and unchristian path. For a start, seeing from below means being able to tell the truth that suffering is present. We don't turn away our faces from the loved ones who are grieving the murders of those who suffered death at the hands of the state-sponsored violence. We tell the truth about what is happening to immigrants who are being dragged away from their communities by today's version of brown shirts and answerable to no law but their own. Resistant empathy now may mean resisting in little things, like taking somebody for a compliance interview, for instance, or taking food to folks who can't go out for fear of being taken. It may mean placing your body in front of oppression, if for no other reason than to bear witness that hate and fear are not the final word to God's yes for this life. And by that, I mean, it may seem like when we go out to protest or whatever, it's not meaningful, but it creates a kind of muscle. It creates a kind of muscle to stand for a more inclusive and democratic society. And it may come to the point where there are costs just to bear witness, just to stand in a space and bear witness to what we've seen in front. The view from below challenges us to repent from ignoring how white supremacy has colonized and distorted Christian faith. The view from below calls us to learn from those in our midst to subsist on meager wages and go hungry every night because of food insecurity, while the systems work to maintain their misery. The view from below understands how the view from the top looks like, how power has been used in the history of America to make those who have no voice, no power, more vulnerable. This view from below that Bonhoeffer encourages us to understand the world gives us the ability to see what the vision of God sees when the world oppresses so many. The view from below may mean no position exists where our delusions, illusions, self-deceptions protect us from the reality that our privilege gives us. And this is now coming clear, ever clearer into focus as we see that the very structures of our lives have created the conditions for others. Where will we position ourselves when a government fails the task of using resources and their power to order our lives so that there is enough for everyone? The view from below means that we are not blind to what those from above are doing to create the conditions life is lived under, which brings far too much oppression. Which brings me to another powerful passage in this small but important writing. Now, I realize in some senses I'm preaching to the choir. All of those of you who are taking time to view this tape uh, instinctually know that these are truths, but failing to see another human being from the perspective of their suffering can lead us to contempt for other human beings. The kind of contempt and condescension that we see daily expressed on social media, and that's sometimes where we can actually be drawn into contempt for our enemies. We can be drawn into contempt for the people that we oppose. Bonhoeffer writes under the section after 10 years, he writes under the section Contempt for Humanity, that when we become contemptuous of other persons, we fall victim to our opponent's chief errors. He says, nothing of what we despise in another in itself is foreign to us. In our oppression to social oppression and our resistance, we walk a hard path in keeping some place for the oppressor, some space for the oppressor who has lost so much of their humanity. And it's so hard to do this. This is a spiritual discipline, and many people will resist this, even this idea. But if we do not create a space for the reconciliation, the renewal of another person's soul, then what happens is that our oppressor makes sure that we end up fighting this on their terms. We become the thing that we most despise. If people are only seen as human capital stock, bodies to be managed and moved around to produce and consume, then we miss something very vital when Bonhoeffer writes, we must learn to regard human beings less in terms of what they do and neglect to do, and more in terms of what they suffer. He goes on to say that relationships and the will to find community will best be built on love because God did not hold human beings in contempt, but became human for their sake. Now, what makes this particularly hard right now, as I've said, is that human beings have a monumentally huge track record of being stupid. And the same Bonhoeffer that caused us to regard other persons in light of the incarnation is clear about human beings. In the famous quote that has launched 1,000 memes, he writes, "Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. One may protest against evil. It can be exposed and, if need be, prevented by use of force. Evil carries within it the seed, the germ of its own subversion, in that it leaves behind in human beings at least a sense of unease. Against stupidity, we are defenseless." Now, you may say, well, how does that reconcile with Bonhoeffer's understanding of not holding people in contempt? And Bonhoeffer here is not talking about stupid people as much as he is a kind of energy that falls upon communities and societies who embrace self-destruction and maliciousness in the service of power. Stupidity, in this sense, is a sociological problem where masses of people embrace a power that destroys true community among persons. And in that way, it can be like an infection that spreads more rapidly in groups because individually people are more inclined to stop, think for themselves, maybe be open to argument. But the powerful count on the power of the mob to acquire and maintain power. And in this way, stupidity grows more rapidly in societies than it does in isolated individuals, especially where surges of power are. Bonhoeffer writes, "Upon closer observation, it becomes apparent that every strong upsurge of power in the public sphere, be it of political or religious nature, infects a large part of humankind with stupidity." So, well, concrete examples here, maybe think of the January the 6th riots or maybe even Trump rallies, and you can see the dynamic he describes at work. Something gets shared among people. There's a kind of a emotive feeling where people just start to uh, become less critical, less self-critical, um, less able to observe the forces that are at work around them. And we should be discerning about what forces are moving people now and ask questions. When millions of Christians and others chase after political power to enforce their understanding of morality, or embrace the evil nihilism of QAnon conspiracies, fantasies, worshiping at the altar of lies, distortion and deception that corrupt persons to manipulate populations, we should call that out from our pulpits, from the street corners, and even letters to the editor's page. How do we overcome this stupidity? How do we overcome this sociological energy and power that seems to drive societies occasionally into destructive spaces? Well, Bonhoeffer says we must be liberated internally from those attempts to colonize us with propaganda and emotion, because that is what the masters of the lie use to keep us in the dark. Bonhoeffer offers us wisdom if we will take it when he writes, "It really will depend on whether those in power expect more from people's stupidity than from their inner independence and wisdom." How are we cultivating this wisdom now? What is the church doing to defeat the insidiousness rotting our society from the inside? What type of discourse now is presently taking place in our churches that would allow us to be able to discern the times, to understand the truth from the lie? Would honest discussion of what has happened to us in American society mean the death of the church? Consider that for a moment. Um, And in the face of this fragile task, Bonhoeffer brings us in this writing for another reason to revisit him for wisdom for our age. under the section, Who Stands Firm, he writes, "The huge masquerade of evil has thrown all ethical concepts into confusion. That evil should appear in the form of light, good deeds, historical necessity, social justice is absolutely bewildering for those of us coming from the world of ethical concepts that we have received. For the Christian who lives by the Bible, it is the very confirmation of the abysmal wickedness of evil." Now, echoing ideas that he explores in the section Ethics as Formation in his Ethics, Bonhoeffer probes how do we stand fast in the face of great evil, especially when that evil cloaks itself as a necessity? How do we keep from being seduced by the powers that whisper in our ear, we have to do this? The world is thus. Bonhoeffer says we must be willing to sacrifice our very ideas of right and wrong in obedient and responsible action in the face of evil. And in doing so, we discover that it is we who made the world as it is, and we can make it different. So when somebody comes to you and just offers well, crime means that we must flood these cities with military power, that is a creation. And once again, preaching to a choir, I know. But the fact of the matter is that evil never masquerades itself in anything other than good, necessary action. And Bonhoeffer recognized this and understood it. And he understood also that responsible action happens when we know the truth. And right now, the truth is ever more fragile and it is hidden from us. So we must grow more discerning in our sources of information, who to trust, whose agenda is being furthered, whose purposes are being served. And that is hard work. But it's more crucial than ever to discern and label what is truly evil. And radical as this is, for Christians, the Bible can help us sort out where the evil is coming from. Bonhoeffer would say we need to pay attention to the material reality in front of us. So one such question is we're paying attention to the reality right in front of us right now. Who benefits the most from what is happening in society and why? Where is the money flowing to? Who is being silenced? Most evil does not happen, like I said, with most evil does not happen without the cloak of righteousness over it. So, for example, concretely, the demand that I will keep you safe conceals the totalitarianism behind it. Safety in the hands of the stupid is always a power grab, thinking that we are too weak and vulnerable to protect ourselves. We are now in a moment of kairos, one where the world that comes after this one is going to look quite different. We stand on the edge of a burning fire that, if allowed to burn, may take a massive amount with it. And even as I say these words, I realize how crazy they sound. I mean, dude, lay off the rhetoric. You're being a little hyperbolic here. I'm not so sure if we look back at December 2024 and look at where we are now, see how much has changed in the world, and think about this continuing for several more years. The future may well be unknown to us, but it will surely not be the past that we grew up in. And even though I'm saying that as a 73-year-old dude, even if you were watching this in your 20, the world is going to be different than the one that you grew up in. It will not look much like it. So, in the midst of that, Bonhoeffer is standing in the wreckage of one of the most sophisticated societies in Europe. He is surveying the massive failures on the part of the church and the state, and he has the courage to ask his co-conspirators in one of the darkest moments of his society, are we of use? Profound question. We can ask it today. And his words here pierce my defenses for, oh, I'm doing all that I can. He writes, we have been silent witnesses of evil deeds. We have become cunning and learned the arts of obfuscation and equivocal speech. Experience has rendered us suspicious of human beings, and often we have failed to speak to them a true and open word. What more does the world need now than a true and open word? A word that comes from a world beyond it, that cuts through the bullshit, the justification of evil people, the chaos that is being created in order that power stays in the hands of the corrupt. This would be a word of redemption, a word that we are loved in wherever we stand. Bonhoeffer's heartbroken plea falls on us anew as persons in our own time with the path back from this madness when he writes, will our inner strength to resist what has been forced on us have remained strong enough, and our honesty with ourselves blunt enough to find our way back to simplicity and honesty? Friends, we all have a task now to cultivate within ourselves the courage to tell the truth in a society that seems to be in love with it, of the lie and its own self-destruction, to attend to the wounds of those under the boot of the state, and in whatever way we find possible, to take the most radical action that Bonhoeffer wrote of early in the regime, maybe even to try and grab control of the state from the misleaders who lead us to destruction and turn it back to a path that serves society and not the gods of power and greed that presently reign. So that's my short contribution for you to think about and reflect upon before we're together. I look forward to our time together in October. And I hope that we can continue these conversations about what does Christian witness look like in the midst of a reign of totalitarianism. Thanks so much.